What's up? It's your boy Vic Purcell, and this is Now Until Up, episode 9. And I thank you for showing up, man. I like the fact that you clicked the play button. So hopefully I can keep you tuned in for a little while. I got some cool things to talk about in the hybrid fitness racing space. And also, if you enjoy instrumentals, music, you can listen to some of my beats on Spotify under Vic the Genius. There's a few albums I put out over the years. I put out stuff here and there, so go check that out. So right now, we're going to get into some topics that I have lined up for you. So we have so I want to let me give you some context. I live in Washington D.C. This is a political city. Some of the content that I consume, some of the books that I read, have nothing to do with fitness or hybrid fitness racing, or hybrid athletes, or any of that. But I do find parallels in some of those things. So I want to talk about a interview that I heard on the Realignment, which is a show that I listen to on Spotify at times, and they had a guest on there. I believe his name was Mauro Gulian. He's from Spain, but he wrote a book called The Perennials. So the Perennials, we're going to get into the Perennials, and but after that, we're going to talk about this top 20 hybrid athletes list, and some of the feedback that came from that. This top 20 hybrid athletes, for those who don't know, this was put out by Hybrid Fitness Racing Media. And yeah, I'm not mad at the list. I just think that it's a good discussion that has come from this list. I think they're updating their list like every month. So we're going to get into that and some of my views on that whole idea of even having this list. And we'll get into a few other things that have coming up, some events and whatnot that you may be interested in. So anyway, let's get into it. So the perennials. The perennials is basically a perennial is someone who doesn't think or act their age in terms of the stereotypical age characteristics that you're supposed to have. And basically, you're a lifelong learner. So a perennial is someone who their lives no longer are premised on clean and clear movement through the sequential model of life. I would put myself into that box. So a perennial is not specific to a particular age. I think a lot of people associate it with like 50 plus year olds, but in reality, it's just for those who no longer have this, like, I got to do this by this age, and I got to do this is the next step. This is the next step. So, the author, in this interview on the Realignment, they were talking about like a lot of different things, like, baby boomers, right? Every country their baby boomer generation didn't start at the same time, right? Because they had different things going on in their country. So, and that maybe those things didn't start the baby boom yet in that particular country. Um, but the whole thing is like this guy believes that we're kind of in a post-generational society now because people are doing things that are different than what we would have thought of in the past. So you see people, and I'm about to bring up the parallels now to the hybrid fitness space. I think when we look at our age group athletes, whatever age group, even from the 20s to the 16-year-olds all the way up to the 60 plus year olds, right? These particular athletes don't fit the normal model, if they're in this space of what we consider an activity that they would be doing at that particular age. When I was in my 20s, I was active. I played basketball. I played basketball in high school. I was in the military after high school, but I always played basketball. That was always a thing. I would run here and there. It never was a focal point after I got out of the military, but still, like, I was always active. For whatever reason, I found this space that I'm in now in my 30s, right? And so now over the last 3 years or so, or basically during the pandemic, I kind of dipped my foot into the water of I didn't even know it was called hybrid fitness right? So I don't even think it was a term. But the point is, you got a lot of people jumping into this particular space that come from different athletic backgrounds. Some people were endurance athletes, some people were strength athletes, some people were college athletes. You got Olympic level athletes, and then you just got people who were sitting at home and decided they wanted to get fit, right? So this is not what we would consider the standard in the past. You would think of like a 50-year-old, or at least when I was coming up, if you were 50, you were like kind of winding things down. Like you just went to work, you had your family, and that was kind of it. Like I didn't really see older athletes in the way that I see them now. So when I show up to some of these events, I see people with their families, and I see people of all different age groups, and they don't look old. They've been better shape than I am, like some of these people, and they're older than me. So like I would just hope that I could be as fit as some of these people that I see at some of these events. By the time I'm not there, by the time I'm their age. So, I think another parallel is like if you're what we would consider, I'm going to call it for the show, perennial athlete, right? If you're a perennial athlete, your mind is kind of wired in a way where you could retool um, because you just showed the world that, hey, I'm retooling so I can compete in the high rocks, or I can compete in the decafit, or I can compete in the go ruck games, or whatever the case may be. Um, you've retooled to something new where that retooling at that particular time of your life, I think it triggers something in your mind where a lot of people think it's harder to go back to school when you're 40 or when you're 50, right? But the way the world's changing, the way technology is changing, you may need to do that, right? My family, both of my grandfathers were coal miners. That is not the case anymore for my family. Like I think I have one uncle that uh, was a coal miner, and he's in his 60s now. But like anyway, they've kind of transitioned out of that. But imagine, you know, still thinking you can be a coal miner and have some of the things that my grandparents were able to have at that time. Like you need to retool. So what I'm saying is being able to find an outlet like hybrid fitness racing where you don't necessarily have to be the best endurance athlete or the best strength athlete, but you're finding that balance. You're kind of towing the line, figuring it out. Your ability to retool in this space or to try this space out, this is kind of like that training ground for the rest of your other life endeavors, right? So I think that's definitely a benefit of being a perennial athlete. And also, when you're older, when you think of the things that you can participate in, um, if you're active, the things that maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago that a 50-year-old was not participating in, you're going to see this age group participating in these active events and having these active lifestyles. So that is, I think, the flexibility to do different things that your parents maybe weren't doing at that particular age, or your grandparents. I think that sounds cool. So I mean, I'm going to try my best to stay fit as long as I can, so I can live my life in a way where I'm not limited to participating in different things that may come up. So that I think that's huge. You don't want to be limited because you're not fit. And I'm not saying you have to be the champion of high rocks or you have to be like the top athlete of your city, but you do you do get a benefit out of like participating in these things and having that balance that you see in the hybrid fitness space. Um, and what is so acting your age? I've heard some athletes talk about their age and they are like, I'm 40, right? I don't feel 40. I probably don't even look 40. When I tell people this, they're like, what? That's crazy. But I am 40. I'm not trying to hide it. It is what it is. Like I love being 40. But I hear some of the athletes, at least in the elite space, talking about retiring, specifically like Hunter talking about retiring. Retire from what? You're going to find something else to do. Maybe it's not this particular race, but I can't imagine someone that is enjoys the participation in competition at that level that will just not be in a space to where they're going to find some other outlet that makes them sweat, right? Um, Now, I'm not saying that retirement from high rocks or retirement from this particular elite space isn't going to happen because obviously, father time, mother time, whatever you want to call it, it catches up to all of us. But you can transition into something else. And as we can see, like I think the younger athletes should take note the way that I'm taking note from some of the people that are a few years older than me. They're not old, but they're just older than me. That they're still pushing it. They're still moving the needle. So when I see people like Marquette, Spartan Soldier 2.0 doing the salt flats, when I see people at my gym that are the same age as me doing uh I forgot what the race is called, but I wish I ever wrote it down. But basically, like the 135-mile race, like I'm just like, this is crazy. Like this is not something that I grew up thinking about participating in at this age. So retire from what? Just keep doing stuff. Retirement is oversold. You know what I mean? So you see a lot of people retire from their jobs and they end up just sitting around watching TV. The body starts degrading, and that's it. That's the end. That's the end of the road for them. But I don't think that that's what's happening to at this point for a lot of people. I think a lot of people are they may go back to work, but a lot of people are like continuing on with whatever they had going on while they were working because they were active. That stuff continues on into their retirement age. And even the idea of not working, maybe that's not even a primary focus. Maybe you can work longer because you've taken the time in your younger years, meaning your 40s, 30s, 50s, or whatever, you've taken that time out and you decided to enjoy that time and have leisure in that time or pursue a camp, an athlete camp at an older age. Maybe you're not going to the Olympics, but maybe you want to take 3 months off if you can. Everybody's not in a position financially to do that. I'm fully aware, but I'm just saying there's a balance, right? That you can say that is happening. And I think it will happen more as, time goes on and as the economy changes. The idea that like you'll retire at 62 and you'll get Social Security, a lot of people already threw that out the window. You know what I'm saying? So just keep your body in shape so you can enjoy life as you go through life. Don't just cut out, well, I got to make this money. I got to do it right now. So the idea that you get all your education when you're young and then you work and then you have your leisure at the end is not how people are thinking. That is not how the perennial athletes think. And when you see people flying out to these races across the world, people going to Dubai, people from the U.S. flying to Europe to compete in these competitions, they are not of the mindset of waiting until they're 60s plus to participate in enjoying life. Enjoy life if you can at this point and stay healthy. So, I mean, I think I can keep going on, but I'll just say just find a way to keep the balance and find a way to look at the world as it changes in a more realistic way. To me, that means you are not looking at the world in a way that we were taught that you follow this path, you do this at this age. Now it's time to do this at this age. Just do what you feel. Be responsible, take care of your kids, take care of your family, but have a real like look in the mirror and decide what is going to make you happy because once you're gone, you're gone. That's it. So just be happy. So yeah, that's that. I think I covered that enough. Um, let's get into this top 20 hybrid athletes list. So the good folks over at Hybrid Fitness Racing Media, they had a list that they put out. I'm not going to get into the particulars. The names that we know, like Meg Jacoby's at the top, Lauren Weeks. Then on the men, you got Hunter McIntyre, Ryan Kent. Those names are on the list, but there's other names that didn't make the list, but they talked about that were in some of the voting. Um, but anyway, what is the purpose of a top 20 hybrid athletes list? Well, what's the purpose of any list? Well, I appreciate the fact that these guys made this list because a lot of the people in the world don't even know who these names are, right? So, and I like the feedback that I saw on Instagram with people challenging the standard that they use to make the list. Now, I understand the standard that they use because I understand there's a internet hybrid athlete and then there's a hybrid athlete who is competing against other hybrid athletes in what we would consider a hybrid fitness race. Again, a hybrid athlete on the internet and a hybrid athlete who's competing against other hybrid athletes in hybrid fitness racing. Um, Now, I'm not saying that you should take away anything from an internet hybrid athlete, meaning someone who's not showing up to these competitions to total line and test themselves and it's public. Now you're on the board to know we know your times. You can look up my times. I'm not the fastest person in high rocks, right? But uh I'm doing all right. I would consider in the pool of all the people I'm decent. Um but you need to elevate the sport, to elevate the particular racing entities, you have to have these lists. And if you're not participating, I don't want to hear about the person who, well, what about this guy who does triathlons but also can squat 500 pounds? Well, what race is they or are they participating in where you need to do both because it's hybrid, right? Now I could train. I have an event coming up in October. It is not a hybrid event. It's a very specific endurance event, and that doesn't mean that I'm not a hybrid athlete because I'm participating in that. Because obviously I have other skills that have nothing to do with that I use in other spaces, but when somebody if they were going to look at that and then I go and tell them that I don't what strength event am I'm not doing powerlifting competitions, right? So you can't just say, well, last year I did this powerlifting competition and this was what I lifted, and then this year I did this triathlon or I did this marathon and this is what I ran. I think all of those things can be considered when you look at uh the full picture of like someone's abilities. But when you're talking about the top 20 in an industry, because this is what they were talking about, in my opinion, they were talking about the hybrid fitness racing industry. Ironman is its own industry, the triathlon industry. So you got to separate things. You got CrossFit. I would still look at CrossFit as they're hybrid athletes for sure, right? You got some CrossFit folks jumping into high rocks, but CrossFit is its own industry. When you look at the people who are participating on a regular basis in what we look at as what Spartan, OCR, DecaFit, Hyrox, GoRuck, Hypercon, the Grit Games. We can go down the list if you want me to. You just send me a message. But there's a list of these events that I haven't even participated in all these events, but these events are being marketed and pushed as hybrid fitness racing competitions. So before we go and look at, oh, what is this person on this influencer doing on his channel? What does their training look like? That training may not even be okay for you if you want to be a better high rise athlete, right? Or a better DecaFit athlete. You might want to look at some other outlets, like the people who are actually competing in those specific competitions. Now, if you just want to look good, have the ability to do this and have the ability to do that, but not necessarily test the ability to do both concurrently, then that is okay too. Like that is still a healthy person. That's still a competitive mindset person. It takes a lot to train for that, but let's be clear, there are hybrid athletes in terms of the internet. I'm not even going to relegate hybrid athletes to have to be a hybrid fitness racing competitor. I'll just say the internet already took that over. So let's not try to reel that back in for all you hybrid fitness racing people out there. It is what it is. They already got it. You're not going to get that back. But when we start talking about list, let's keep it a buck. The lists have to be specific to the industry, not the YouTube page with the guy with the video running around the track and then he goes squat something or deadlifts. That's not a competition. That is the internet. Again, that is the internet. That is not a race. That is not an industry. So that's my view on that. And I think so. I had another view to drop in there. So it's a caveat. So if you're doing triathlons, marathons, powerlifting, strongman competitions, high rocks, whatever. If you're doing these events, maybe you're not winning those events, but I would say this. Now, you may not end up on his list, but you might end up on my list. If I was comparing abilities and I wanted to say who is the best hybrid athlete when looking at all things, if you're doing these like within the same time period, like say 6 to 8 months, you're doing completely different sides of the spectrum type events, like these endurance events and then a strength event. Not to say you're the fastest, but you have very impressive numbers on both sides and you do them close together. Maybe 6 to 8 months is too long. Maybe it needs to be like 3 months, right? You do them close together enough. I may put that into my personal list as like, well, this person, this man or woman, that's not a hybrid fitness race. But I don't think any of these people at the hybrid fitness races that are on this list can do what this person just did. So I'm going to give them the nudge, that say that they should be on the list. So again, if you're doing these things at events, not on YouTube, but actual you know, events that you have to sign up for and do all those things, then I might give you that. I'll give you credit for that, right? So, um, yeah. So I think again, let's keep these lists going. Um, and I think we need to get more lists out there. We need to have discussions. I think like what I'm trying to bring up now. I want to hear. I'm gonna talk later this month. I'm gonna be on another show with a few people. I'm gonna bring this topic up because I think the lists need to be a little bit more. We need some expansion. Maybe I'll talk about my top athletes on the show, like top athlete of the week or something like that. So, but I'm not just going to make it random. It has to be, I got to know what you got going on, right? So, but yeah, so that's that. I think I touched on that good enough amount of time. So, what do we got going on here? So, the Bell Ringer 100-mile ride. This is not a race. This is a fundraiser for cancer research at Georgetown University. And this will be my second year participating in this 100-mile ride. And I am on a team of four, and it's sponsored by Oarsman Cars. This is a DC, Maryland, Virginia company, large car company. So it's sponsored by Oarsman Cars, but it's through Elevate. If you all know David Magita's gym, so it'll be myself, David Magita, and two other fellas from the gym. And yeah, last year was rough. I'm gonna be honest. I definitely did it. I was so happy when it was over. A lot of riding solo. So yeah, it is a team. We're wearing the same kit, but you're doing this thing individually and up to a certain, but not at first. And early on, like we're kind of catching up at the rest stops or whatever. But I was definitely not prepared in a way. No, I was definitely prepared, but it was just a lot. I'm gonna be honest. But I signed up for it again, so obviously it wouldn't be so much, right? So the thing is, this 100 mile starts at Georgetown. They block off all the roads up to a certain point, and it was definitely a good experience. It was rough. The second 50 miles was rough. I'm gonna be honest. That's where most of the elevation was. So it was about almost 7,000 feet of elevation over the ride. But most of it was in the second half. We go around Sugarloaf Mountain in uh in Maryland, around like Frederick, Maryland, and yeah, I'm just like trying to get myself ready. I did a 50-mile ride last weekend. Just to, I've been riding my bike, but I don't ride like 50 miles, right? I might do like 20, maybe 30 tops, but I pulled out a 50 piece. So after doing that, I was like, okay, I still got it. I can build myself up by the end of October to do this ride. So that's going to be cool, but it's definitely good to do something where I don't consider it a competition. It's just, uh, shout out to Oarsman and Elevate and the money that's going towards cancer research. And, shout out to the folks doing the 25 miler and the 50 miler. Um, but we're gonna go for that big 100. So that's coming up in October. I will be honest, a little peer pressure. Um, it's a little peer pressure in terms of getting me to do this again, and training concurrently for this while I'm preparing myself for the high rock season. It's very confusing, but I'm making it work. You can't ride. I can't just ride the bike. I have to continue on with the hybrid fitness training, and but this is helping me in the base building period, right? Last year, before I got injured, I PR'd on a high rocks without even training for high rocks, and basically it was after this bike ride. So the training for the cycling for the 100 miles, I think it just prepared me mentally to just show up to a high rocks without doing any like real compromise work before the high rocks. And yeah, and I just had that grit from the race, from the 100 mile ride. I think it was like maybe 2 weeks after the ride. So yeah, I think it's beneficial for you all out there to like venture into maybe test some cycling stuff out, because as a 200 pounder, 200 plus pounder, it's a lot to run significant miles past a certain number. Everybody's background is different. I mean, I can do 40 miles a week if I wanted to, but like it takes away from other things. So, but riding a bike, I definitely can put the volume in if I mix it up. So we're gonna make that happen. And after that, we're gonna jump into High Rocks. You'll see me at High Rocks, LA. Maybe you'll see me before that, but I doubt it. But High Rocks, LA, I'll be out there. And we're gonna see how that plays out. But I think I'm gonna do all right. So, you know, just check me out there. And tomorrow, if I can post this tonight, I'll post it. But tomorrow, I will be participating in a Deca Mile and a Deca Strong teams, both with teams. So I'll be racing with my previous Deca Strong partner, Eric Williams. This will be happening at Elevate in DC, Elevate Interval Fitness. And we're going to see. I have not really trained specifically for either of these. But I know when I did the first Deca Strong team, it was a fun event. And I was also like probably a good 8 to 9 pounds heavier. Just came back from vacation in Sicily, and I basically took like 5 weeks or so off from just like doing anything. And we're gonna see how it goes tomorrow. I think I'm gonna do a little bit better. They bumped us out of the top 20 a couple weeks ago. So we're like 28 right now. So we gotta get a sub 10. I'm looking for a sub 10-minute time, and I think we got it for Deca Strong. Deca Mile, I have no idea how it's gonna play out because the course is not flat. The running course is not flat outside of Elevate. So it is what it is, but we just gonna shoot the shot and see how it goes. But it is crazy because Eric's double dipping, so I ain't gonna get into that. But he's double dipping on the Deca Mile teams. But I ain't mad at him. As long as he saves his energy for our competitions, I'm good. But yeah, I think that's enough for today. Yeah, so I hope you got something out of this. I'm gonna keep putting these episodes out. I'm gonna have some guests on here. I've been holding off on having certain people in my circle on the show because I just want to kind of get these solo podcasts out because I think it's fun to just test things out. Put your foot in dip your toe in the water and see how the thing goes, right? It's plenty of chit chat going on these other podcasts. I listen to a lot of these podcasts. I will say this, and I ain't throwing no shade at nobody, right? It's a lot of like weird energy in some of the conversations that I hear sometimes. I get a lot out of the content, get a lot of tips out of the content, but like, this space isn't that large. Y'all ain't really competing for like, at least in the media space, but so much at this point. We're not there yet. You know what I mean? So just like, I think there needs to be a little bit more collaboration. Um, on some of these shows, even, yeah. So you can't have too much fear of your competition on the course when you're doing these particular media endeavors because it's just not the same thing. You want the sport to grow, but some of the banter is good. I like to hear some of the shit talking. I'm gonna just be honest, but some of it gets a little weird at times. But maybe that's just my personality. I'm not really that guy to talk about it like that. But I just felt like bringing it up now. So anyway, that's it. That's all I got. Now until up, stay tuned for more. And check out my instrumentals, beats on Spotify, iTunes, and all of those different things. Vic the Genius. You can even use them in your reels on like Instagram. I don't do TikTok. Maybe it's on there too. But yeah, that's it. Shout out to all of y'all. Thank you. Subscribe, share.